All right, thank you, Erica. So I'll just remind everyone that today you are able to come off mute and you are able to ask your questions verbally if you would like. Or if you would feel more comfortable chatting them, you can feel free to do that as well. I'll just mention that one question did come directly to me through the chat, just kind of asking about the FTP files that Erica pointed out in her slides. And, if you were to download them, if you would get automatic updates. If you download them to your computer locally, you don't get automatic updates. You would have to re-download them every time. But if you are working with a particular software program, that program might be able to kind of pull that information for you on a nightly basis. So, if there are particular vendors that you guys work with that you would like to ask them, can you incorporate this in your software? We're happy to work with them if they have any questions about how to do that. So just feel free to get in touch with us if that's something that you're interested in. The generic ClinGen email address, clingen@clinicalgenome.org, will come to me and we can get that sorted for you. I think Erica also mentioned, though, if you use the UCSC genome browser as your visualization of choice, that does already have automatic updates. So if that's what you use, that's already taken care of. All right, well, Erica, I don't see any questions in the chat, so I will ask you a question. Can you share with us a little bit about what your own lab's experience has been implementing these guidelines? I realize, this has been a big change from the 2011 version. So kind of how are you guys dealing with it at ARUP?
Yeah, sure. And as I mentioned in the talk in November, several of us on the guidelines committee did do recordings sort of on behalf of our experience trying to implement the new technical standards that I think were actually really useful, especially from the laboratory side, to kind of hear from some of my colleagues to see how they're using the metrics and what scenarios they're most beneficial. And so, for those of you that have had a chance to look at them and maybe even start to use them, one of the areas that we really feel like they're really useful is when you're evaluating a CNV that's kind of getting close to that VUS to L likely pathogenic category. In my lab, we do not typically run, and we do exclusively genomic microarray testing. We do not typically run parental arrays when patients' samples are being tested. And so as we discussed in the metrics, sometimes if you know that a particular CNV is inherited versus de novo, it can actually bump it up in clinical classification. And so, we've kind of used the metrics to score these types of CNVs to determine, okay, does it constitute a VUS or is it likely pathogenic? It helps us decide whether, we should offer free parental testing, in which case it may, alter the clinical classification, which generally should be done. And so it's really helped us with those types of decisions. We've also been able to better standardize our reports that, historically we kind of used some more generic ways of describing our findings. We just call cases abnormal, that really covered both pathogenic and likely pathogenic findings. And so we've started to actually, require to have a classification at the top of the reports. And then, we're using that field to help us build report templates that we can use for different scenarios and make sure that we're sort of evaluating different CNVs in a consistent way. So I think it's been really helpful to have more guidance around, how to do this. We use it for training new people. It's been a great tool for that because we now have, more rules and more instructions for how to do these types of evaluations, and also how to, what resources to use, how to document. so that, you know, in the future, if we have to come back and evaluate a CNV again, or, you know, a similar CNV, we already have a lot of this information pulled together in a consistent way. So those are some of the benefits that we've had by, you know, starting to implement the guidelines.
Great. And we did get a question coming in through the chat. Can you use the dosage sensitivity map for CMVs that are called by exome or genome sequencing?
Yeah, absolutely. The dosage sensitivity map is really a resource that is platform agnostic. So regardless of how you're detecting CNVs, it's going to have information in there that you know, pertains to a deletion or a duplication, and you know, also can be valuable for loss of function types of sequence variant evaluations. So it really just gives you an evidence score that relates to genes, or in some cases genomic regions, so that when you have a CNV and you know it hits one of these, if it's an established dosage sensitive 3 score, then you can really kind of like use that information to triage your review, and you know, in most cases call those pathogenic and move on. So, you know, it's definitely intended to be a tool that can assist for assist in interpretation of a lot of different variant types across all platforms.
And we are almost at the end of time, so this will be the last question that I ask you, coming from the chat. In the case of overlapping CMVs, does the curation of the newly identified one get impacted by one that was already known? Or like, how do we evaluate CMVs that overlap?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, that's one of the sort of inherent challenges with CNVs is, you know, how do you know if the CNV that you're evaluating is similar enough to one from the literature that you can sort of use the information equivalently? And I think, you know, there are 2 CNV types that I'm thinking of, like a unique CNV that, you know, may occur anywhere in the genome. You're going to want to, you know, try to pull in information from, you know, different resources, the literature, and other resources that we covered today that discuss individual genes within the region, as well as region level information. And that's one of the reasons why in the metrics we provided some flexibility in, you know, what scores to provide to individual probands that you may encounter from the literature. Because let's say you have a CNV that's somewhat similar, but not, you know, doesn't overlap entirely, you may give it fewer points based on, you know, just the extent of overlap. For recurrent CNVs that really do have the same breakpoints, the ones that, you know, we discussed are in that track that we provide, you know, those I think you can sort of go back to the same literature. It does evolve more quickly. So that's one of the reasons why we have a subgroup in ClinGen that's specifically curating those. And we should have some news out about those new metrics later in the year.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Erica. I suspect we're going to get shuttled back into the main room any moment now. If you would like to go there directly, I believe you can just click on leave room and then switch back over to the main, or else the Zoom will shuttle you over there for your third choice for the last hour of the workshop. So thank you so much for attending the CMV workshop.
Thanks, everybody.